5:47 a.m. Joliet, Illinois. Loading dock of a shuttered chicken plant on County Road 12. 16 FBI agents and 7 Illinois State Police officers breached the roll-up doors. Inside, 3 men in work gloves were resealing the rear doors of a 40-foot trailer. Pharmaceutical cartons stacked floor to ceiling. Street value, $4.2 million. The trailer had been reported stolen from a warehouse in Columbus, Ohio, 72 hours earlier. Over 11 weeks of investigation, federal agents would dismantle what turned out to be the largest organized cargo theft network ever documented in Illinois. By sunrise, agents would recover $18.4 million in stolen freight, execute 9 arrests across 3 locations, and uncover a system that had been operating undetected since November of 2025. The first real lead came from a fuel clerk who caught a billing error. April 17, 2026. 3:32 p.m. Roadside Fuel and Travel Plaza, 12 miles west of Joliet. Rachel Hayes had worked the fuel desk for 6 years. She processed between 40 and 60 diesel orders per shift. She knew the regular accounts. She knew which plants ordered what volumes and when. She knew the seasonal patterns, the rush periods, the companies that paid on time, and the ones that didn't. That Thursday afternoon, a diesel order came through the system, 900 gallons, billed to Crestview Poultry Processing on Industrial Park Drive. 900 gallons was a standard fleet fill for a mid-sized processing operation. Nothing unusual about the volume. The billing code was valid. The credit account cleared. By every automated metric, it was routine. But Crestview had been closed since November of 2019. Hayes remembered because her brother-in-law had worked there before the layoffs. She'd driven past the property a dozen times over the years. Fence locked. Weeds growing through the loading apron. Windows dark. She flagged it internally. Her supervisor pulled the account history. The billing system showed the Crestview account had been active for the past 6 months. Regular charges. Regular payments. Supervisor told her the property had probably been sold or leased. New tenant using the old company code until the paperwork caught up. It happened sometimes. Hayes accepted that explanation. But 2 details stayed with her. First, the order was for immediate pickup, not scheduled delivery. That meant a driver would be fueling a vehicle on site at the plant within the next few hours. If the place was truly reopened under new management, there would be signs of activity. Vehicles. Workers. Something. Second, the credit account showed its first charge on October 9, 2025. 6 months of regular diesel orders. If a new business had taken over the property, why hadn't anyone updated the company name in the system? Hayes finished her shift. Drove home. Made dinner. She couldn't stop thinking about it. At 11:20 p.m., she drove past the Crestview plant. The property sat behind a chain-link fence, exactly as she'd remembered it. Weeds. Rust. Darkness. A for-lease sign hung on the gate, the contact number faded but still visible. No vehicles. No lights. The place was as abandoned as ever. She went home. Tried to sleep. Couldn't. At 11:53 p.m., she drove past the plant again. This time, the loading dock lights were on. She could see the glow from County Road 12, 200 yards away. She pulled into a gravel lot across the street, killed her headlights and watched. At 12:07 a.m., A white Freightliner tractor pulling a 53-foot trailer turned onto Industrial Park Drive and approached the gate. The driver got out, opened the padlock with a key, swung the gate wide, and backed the trailer into the dock. Diesel engine idling. Hayes could smell it from across the road. The building had no active power meter. She'd checked during daylight. The utility box on the exterior wall was empty, the cables disconnected. So where was the dock lighting coming from? Portable generator? Battery array? It didn't make sense. Hayes called the non-emergency line for the Joliet Police Department at 12:23 a.m. The dispatcher took her information: abandoned property, active vehicle, lights on inside a building with no power. Dispatcher said someone would look into it. No one called back. 3 days later, April 20th, Hayes called again. Same dispatcher. This time, the woman told her the property was privately owned, and there was no evidence of criminal activity visible from the road. Could be a security company using it for vehicle storage. Could be the property owner conducting maintenance. Not a police matter unless there was a break-in or trespassing complaint from the owner. Hayes asked if anyone had actually driven out there to look. Dispatcher said she couldn't confirm. Hayes didn't call a third time. Instead, on April 23rd, she sent an email to the FBI's Chicago field office through the online tip portal. She attached a PDF of the fuel billing records showing 6 months of charges to Crestview Poultry Processing. She included the dates and times she'd observed activity at the plant. She included the detail about the disconnected power meter. She included photos she'd taken from the road showing the locked gate and the overgrown loading apron during daylight, and a second photo taken at night showing the glow of interior lighting. The email sat in a queue for 9 days. On May 2nd, Special Agent David Keller opened it. Keller had been working cargo theft cases for the FBI's Chicago division for 3 years. He'd seen the pattern Hayes was describing before. Fuel orders billed to inactive accounts. Nighttime activity at abandoned commercial properties. Trailers coming and going with no legitimate business presence. It was a red flag for cross-docking stolen freight. Cargo theft had become a $200 million problem in the Midwest by early 2026. The surge wasn't driven by armed hijacking or hot-wiring trucks in parking lots. It was identity fraud at an industrial scale. Criminals were creating fake trucking companies that assumed the operating authority of real, legitimate carriers. The method was disturbingly simple. File paperwork with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Obtain a Department of Transportation number. Forge an insurance certificate. Set up a commercial phone line. Register with a few freight brokers. Wait for a load offer. When a broker posted a shipment, the fake company would bid. If accepted, a driver would show up at the warehouse with a commercial driver's license, a DOT number that checked out in the federal database, and a bill of lading that matched the shipment details. The warehouse staff would scan the paperwork, verify the truck number, and load the freight. The driver would sign for it, pull out of the dock, and disappear. By the time the shipper realized the load never arrived at its destination, the trailer had been cross-docked to a different vehicle. The freight had been re-tagged with forged labels, and the fake company had dissolved. No forwarding address. No contact number. No way to trace where the cargo went. The industry called them chameleon carriers. What made this scheme work? Invisibility. There was no forced entry. No violence. No physical theft that would trigger an immediate police response. Just paperwork. The fraud happened at the administrative level, in the gap between when a broker verified a carrier's credentials and when the freight was supposed to arrive at its destination. That gap could be 24 to 72 hours. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, the evidence was gone. Keller pulled the fuel records Hayes had sent. Crestview Poultry Processing had been ordering diesel every 11 to 14 days since late October of 2025. Total billed over 6 months, $41,600. The payment method was a commercial credit account opened in the name of a company called Northway Logistics Group with a billing address in Naperville, Illinois. Keller ran Northway through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration database. The company existed. It had filed for operating authority on August 14, 2025. The registration listed an address in Naperville, a phone number, and a business classification, general freight hauling. But the details were wrong. 0 active vehicles on file. 0 drivers. No insurance policy listed. No safety inspections. No traffic violations. No movement history. A shell company. Paperwork without operations. Keller cross-checked the Naperville address. It was a small office park. He called the building manager. No company named Northway Logistics had ever leased space there. The address on the FMCSA filing didn't correspond to an actual suite number. Forged address. Forged registration. But a real DOT number, issued by a real federal agency, that would pass a broker's verification check. On May 6th, Keller and Detective Tom Brennan from the Illinois State Police Cargo Theft Unit drove to the Crestview plant. They didn't approach the property. They parked a quarter-mile west on County Road 12, in the lot of a closed auto parts store, and watched through binoculars. At 2:17 p.m., a white Freightliner tractor pulling a 53-foot dry van trailer turned onto Industrial Park Drive. The driver got out, unlocked the gate with a key, and backed the trailer into the loading dock. The roll-up door was already open. The driver disappeared inside. Keller and Brennan waited. At 3:51 p.m., the same Freightliner tractor pulled out of the dock. But it was towing a different trailer. The one that had arrived at 2:17 was still inside the plant. The tractor left. The gate was locked again. The property went silent. 70 minutes. One trailer in, a different trailer out. Classic cross-dock timing. Keller requested authorization for a pole camera installation. Request approved, May 8th. By May 10th, 2 covert cameras were mounted on utility poles with clear sight lines to the Crestview loading dock and the access road. Over the next 6 weeks, those cameras logged a pattern. A tractor pulling a loaded trailer would arrive, typically between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., sometimes during mid-afternoon. The trailer would be backed into the dock. Between 70 and 110 minutes later, the same tractor would leave pulling a different trailer. The original trailer would remain inside the plant for anywhere from 6 hours to 3 full days before being picked up by another tractor and hauled away. Keller logged 31 trailer movements between May 10th and June 22nd. The tractors rotated. The drivers rotated. The trailer numbers changed. But the location stayed constant, as did the operational pattern: unload, reload, move out. The critical question: whose freight was inside those trailers? Keller cross-referenced the dates and times of observed trailer activity at Crestview against the National Cargo Theft Database. a database maintained by the FBI and freight industry partners for reported thefts across the United States. 12 matches. May 14th. A trailer of consumer electronics stolen from a warehouse in South Bend, Indiana, was reported missing at 6:43 a.m. Poll camera footage showed a matching trailer arriving at Crestview at 4:11 a.m. that same morning. May 19th. Pharmaceuticals stolen from a distribution center in Columbus, Ohio. Trailer arrived at Crestview 11 hours later. May 27th. High-end appliances stolen from a staging yard in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Trailer observed at Crestview the following morning. The pattern held across 12 thefts. Each one followed the chameleon carrier method. A fake trucking company books the load through a freight broker. The driver shows up with forged paperwork. The warehouse loads the trailer. By morning, the freight is gone. Hours later, the trailer shows up at Crestview for cross-docking. By mid-June, Keller had enough to establish probable cause. But he didn't have names. The drivers rotated. The tractors had no permanent fleet identification. The phone number listed for Northway Logistics went to a disconnected voicemail. Keller needed a break in the pattern. On June 19th, that break arrived. A truck driver walked into the FBI's Chicago field office and asked to speak to someone about a cargo theft investigation. The driver, whose identity remains sealed under federal witness protection, told Keller he'd been hired 3 months earlier to haul freight for what he believed was a legitimate logistics company. He'd been paid in cash. He'd been given load assignments via text message. He'd never met his dispatcher in person. 2 weeks earlier, the driver had been pulled over during a routine Illinois State Police inspection. The trooper ran the trailer number. It came back as reported stolen. The driver was detained for 6 hours before investigators concluded he'd been unknowingly hired to move stolen freight. He was released without charges, but told his cooperation would be expected if the case went further. Now he was ready to cooperate. The driver gave Keller the phone number for his dispatcher. Keller obtained a warrant for call detail records. The number had been in contact with 17 other phones over the past 4 months. All prepaid burners, activated with cash at different locations, across Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. But one number in the network appeared more frequently than the others. That number had placed 43 calls to phones that pinged cell towers within a quarter mile of the Crestview plant during times that matched the poll camera footage. Keller requested a wiretap authorization on that number. Request denied, June 23rd. The federal magistrate ruled that call records and surveillance footage were insufficient to establish probable cause for a live intercept. The judge wanted evidence of an ongoing conspiracy with identified participants. Phone metadata alone wasn't enough. This was the obstacle that nearly stalled the case. Without the wiretap, Keller couldn't intercept communications. Without those intercepts, he couldn't identify the coordinators. Without names, no arrest warrants. Without warrants, no justification to raid the plant. If the crew suspected federal attention, they would shut down the operation, abandon the facility, and disappear. Keller had one option left: follow the money. He requested financial records for Northway Logistics Group, the shell company paying for diesel at the fuel plaza. The company had opened a commercial credit account with a Wisconsin-based credit union in September of 2025. Keller subpoenaed the account records. The application listed a business address in Schaumburg, Illinois. Keller and Brennan drove there on June 25th. The address was a UPS store in a strip mall. Mailbox rental. No physical office. But the credit union's policy required a real person to open a commercial account. That person's name was on the signature card, along with a photocopy of a driver's license. Marcus Chen. Date of birth, March 12, 1992. Keller ran the name through the federal criminal database. Marcus Chen had 2 prior convictions. Wire fraud in 2021. Interstate transportation of stolen property in 2023. He'd been sentenced to 24 months in federal custody. Released September 9th, 2025. 6 weeks after his release, Northway Logistics Group filed for operating authority with the FMCSA. 2 weeks after that, the first diesel order was placed at the fuel plaza under Crestview Poultry Processing's account. Chen was the link. With Chen's identity, Keller could connect the surveillance footage, the financial records, the stolen freight reports, and the cooperating driver's testimony. On June 26th, he obtained a federal arrest warrant for Marcus Chen on charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, and aggravated identity theft. But Keller didn't execute the warrant immediately. Arresting Chen would shut down the Crestview operation, but it wouldn't dismantle the network. It wouldn't recover the freight that was still in transit. It wouldn't identify every participant. Keller wanted the whole structure. That meant waiting for the right moment. A coordinated takedown across multiple sites, timed to catch the crew in the act. He briefed the U.S. Attorney's Office on June 27th. A joint task force was approved. 17 FBI agents. 12 Illinois State Police troopers. 3 target locations: the Crestview plant, a warehouse in Romeoville linked to Chen's finances, and any vehicles observed leaving Crestview during the operation. The tactical plan called for simultaneous raids at all 3 sites. If one team moved early, the others would be compromised. Coordination had to be exact. The challenge was timing. Surveillance showed that high-value loads typically arrived at Crestview on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Once a trailer was inside, the cross-dock process took 70 to 90 minutes. If the raid happened too early, before the freight was unloaded, agents would find an empty plant. Too late, and the trailer would be gone. Keller needed advance intelligence on when the next high-value load would arrive. The cooperating driver provided it. On June 29th, he received a text from his dispatcher. Stand by for pickup Thursday morning, 3:30 a.m., Crestview location. Load described as medical supplies. Destination unspecified. Keller cross-checked against the cargo theft database. A trailer of pharmaceuticals had been reported stolen from a distribution warehouse in Columbus, Ohio, at 11:47 p.m. on June 28th. Value: $4.2 million. This was the target. July 3rd, 2026. 3:55 a.m. Pole cameras captured a white Freightliner tractor pulling a 40-foot trailer through the Crestview gate. The trailer matched the description of the stolen Columbus load. Keller confirmed it with the warehouse's security footage, matching trailer number, side panel damage, and mud flaps. At 4:12 a.m., the task force moved. 16 agents in tactical gear approached from the West Access Road on foot. 7 Illinois State Police officers secured the perimeter. No lights. No sirens. The loading dock was lit from inside. The roll-up door was open. Keller could see 3 figures moving inside the plant, unloading cartons from the trailer. At 5:47 a.m., agents breached, The lead team entered through the dock. The three men inside froze. Hands visible. No resistance. They were taken into custody within 90 seconds. Inside the plant, agents found the stolen trailer of pharmaceuticals, still half loaded with cartons of prescription medications. A second trailer sat in the adjacent bay, containing electronics that matched the description of a load stolen from Gary, Indiana, 11 days earlier. In a makeshift office area near the rear of the building, agents discovered a work table with a laminator, a commercial printer, and stacks of blank carrier placards. On the wall, forged Department of Transportation certificates for 6 different trucking companies. All were real companies. The owners had no idea their identities had been cloned. Also recovered, a ledger notebook with handwritten entries documenting 47 trailer movements over the past 8 months. Each entry listed a date, a load description, an origin location, and a 3-letter code that agents later determined corresponded to the buyer who'd purchased the stolen freight. At the same time, the Crestview raid was underway. 8 miles south in Romoville, a second FBI team executed a search warrant on a commercial storage facility. The unit had been rented under Marcus Chen's name in November of 2025, paid for with a credit card linked to the Northway Logistics account. Inside, 312 pallets of consumer goods, clothing, electronics, small appliances, home goods, all reported stolen over the past 4 months from warehouses across the Midwest. Estimated total value, $9.1 million. Simultaneously, at 6:03 a.m., Illinois State Police deployed a spike strip on the northbound Interstate 55 on-ramp near Bolingbrook. Automatic license plate readers had flagged a tractor trailer matching the description of a vehicle observed leaving Crestview on July 1st. The trailer had been reported stolen from a warehouse in Rockford. The driver spotted the spike strip and attempted to evade by veering onto the shoulder. The maneuver failed. The front tires blew. The tractor came to a stop on the ramp. The driver was removed from the cab and arrested. The trailer contained $5.1 million in stolen electronics, still in their original shipping cartons. By 8:30 a.m., 9 individuals were in custody across the 3 locations. At 9:15 a.m., FBI agents executed an arrest warrant at a residence in Aurora. Marcus Chen was taken into custody without incident. He was charged with leading a conspiracy to commit wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, aggravated identity theft, and money laundering. Total freight recovered, $18.4 million. The investigation that followed revealed the operational scope. The Crestview network had been active since November of 2025. During that 8-month period, agents documented 43 confirmed stolen loads passing through the plant. Not all of the freight was recovered. 12 loads, valued at approximately $8 million, had already been sold and distributed into the secondary market before the raids. Chen had recruited drivers through online job boards and classified ads, offering cash payments with no questions asked. Most of the drivers believed they were working for a legitimate logistics company handling overflow freight during high-demand periods. Some suspected the operation was illegal, but didn't ask. A few knew exactly what they were hauling and didn't care. The buyers, the individuals and businesses purchasing the stolen freight, were identified through the ledger recovered at Crestview. Federal prosecutors filed charges against 4 of them. The others couldn't be located or were operating under false identities themselves. Chen pleaded guilty in federal court on October 9, 2026. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and ordered to pay restitution of $12.3 million. His 8 co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 18 months to 4 years. Rachel Hayes, the fuel clerk who flagged the original diesel order, was never publicly named in the investigation. The FBI sent her a letter of appreciation for her cooperation. She didn't frame it, but she filed it in a drawer at home and went back to work. This case reveals something important about cargo theft in 2026. This isn't a niche crime anymore, it's industrialized. The methods work. The networks span states. And the system that's supposed to catch this is fundamentally broken. According to the report published by thetrucker.com on August 7, 2026, cargo theft losses in the United States more than doubled in the second quarter of this year, reaching $304 million. The majority of those thefts followed the chameleon carrier model that Chen's network used. Fake companies, cloned identities, no forced entry, just paperwork and timing. What stands out about the Joliet case is how long the operation ran before anyone noticed. November of 2025 to July of 2026. 8 months. 43 documented loads. Millions of dollars in freight moving through a shuttered chicken plant, and the only reason it stopped was because one fuel clerk noticed a billing discrepancy and couldn't let it go. Put yourself in Rachel Hayes' position for a moment. You spot an inconsistency. You report it to the police. No one calls back. You report it again. You're told it's not a police matter. At that point, most people move on. They assume someone else will handle it, or that maybe they were wrong, or that it's not worth the effort. Hayes didn't stop. She escalated it. She documented it. She sent photos and billing records to the FBI, and that persistence is the only reason this case exists. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. The system failed long before Hayes made that first call. The freight industry has known about chameleon carriers for years. Brokers have known. Shippers have known. Law enforcement has known. Yet the verification systems that are supposed to catch fraudulent operating authority remain easy to circumvent. A forged insurance certificate, a cloned DOT number, a fake business address. That's all it takes to pass a broker's background check and book a multi-million-dollar load. Should the industry have closed that gap before it cost $300 million in a single quarter? We think the answer is obvious. There's a detail in the federal indictment that reads almost like fiction. It describes how one of Chen's chameleon carriers filed paperwork under the stolen identity of Riverside Freight Solutions, a small family-owned trucking company in Toledo, for 6 consecutive months, without the real company knowing. 6 months. The fake company was moving freight, billing clients, and operating under Riverside's name, while the real Riverside continued its own business, completely unaware that its identity was being used to commit federal crimes in 3 states. That's not a failure of enforcement. That's a structural flaw in how the industry verifies who it's doing business with. A question: how many other operations like Crestview are still running right now? The FBI dismantled this network, but the method is public knowledge. The vulnerabilities haven't been fixed, and the financial incentive, tens of millions of dollars in untraceable freight, remains. Do you think this was an isolated case, or just the one that happened to get caught? The cooperating driver, the one who gave Keller the phone number that ultimately broke the case open, told investigators he'd worked for 3 other logistics companies over the past year. He'd been hired through online ads, paid in cash. No questions asked about the jobs. He said he genuinely believed it was legal. The freight had shipping labels. The warehouses had loading docks and security guards. Everything looked legitimate. It wasn't until he was pulled over and the trooper told him the trailer was reported stolen that he realized he'd been moving stolen goods for months. And that's the structural problem. In a system where legitimacy is just a document you can print and a phone number you can activate, how do you know when you're being used? The uncomfortable truth, the real failure in this case, wasn't Chen. He's a career criminal. He saw an opportunity and exploited it. The failure was in the industry systems that allowed him to exploit it for 8 months without detection. Freight brokers are not required to independently verify insurance policies. They rely on certificates provided by the carrier. Those certificates can be forged in under an hour using publicly available templates. Warehouses are not required to confirm that the driver picking up a load actually works for the company listed on the paperwork. They check a DOT number against a federal database, and if it matches, they load the truck. The verification process is built on trust. And trust, in a system moving billions of dollars in freight annually, is a vulnerability. Should brokers and shippers have done more to verify carrier identities before this became a $300 million problem in a single quarter? We think they should have. And the fact that it took a fuel clerk noticing a billing error to expose one of these networks tells you how deep the gap really is. The FBI recovered $18.4 million in stolen freight. That's a significant win. But at least $8 million from the Crestview operation was never found. Some had been sold before the raids. Some had been moved out of state. Some probably sits in warehouses still, waiting for a buyer. The 43 stolen loads documented in this case represent a fraction of the total cargo theft activity in the Midwest during the same 8-month period. The National Cargo Theft Database recorded over 200 separate incidents in Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Ohio between November of 2025 and July of 2026. Not all were chameleon carrier thefts, but the majority followed some variation of the same identity fraud model. For every network that gets dismantled, how many are still operating? The Joliet task force shut down one cross-dock. But the demand for stolen freight, the buyers willing to purchase goods at 20 to 30% below wholesale with no questions asked, that demand still exists. The structural gaps that allowed Chen to file for operating authority under a fake address and a cloned identity remain open. The verification systems are the same today as they were when Northway Logistics first registered in August of 2025. Today, there is no federal mandate requiring real-time verification of carrier insurance policies. Brokers are not required to confirm that a trucking company's listed address corresponds to an actual physical location. The systems that flag fraudulent DOT numbers are reactive, not preventive. They catch the problem after the freight is already gone. Marcus Chen is serving a 7-year sentence in federal prison. His 8 co-conspirators are serving their time. The Crestview plant remains abandoned. The for lease sign hangs on the gate, faded. Weeds grow through the loading apron. Rachel Hayes still works at the roadside fuel and travel plaza. She still processes diesel orders, still knows the regulars by account. And sometimes, late at night when her shift ends, she drives past the old Crestview plant to see if the lights are on. They're not. Not anymore. But somewhere else, a shuttered warehouse sits behind a chain-link fence. A white tractor backs a trailer into a loading dock. The forged paperwork clears the broker's verification. The freight disappears. The network continues. The Crestview network is gone. The industry that made it possible is still operating exactly the way it did